Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session, Mitigating Compliance Risks with Exclaimer's new Disclaimers feature. A bit of tongue twister. My name is James Wayne, and I'm the Senior Product Manager at Exclaimer, and I will be hosting today's session. Now, before we get into the details, I'm just going to say it straight out of the gate. We know that this subject isn't a particularly glamorous one. No one's really truly excited about the prospect of email disclaimers. But that being said, they are incredibly important. They really do matter when it comes to protecting your organization's reputation and avoiding the risks of penalties and fines. Whether you're operating in the US, in something like healthcare, financial services in the UK, or a multinational organization who has to navigate the complexities of GDPR, HIPAA, or anything like that. Disclaimers help you to stay compliant and ultimately protect your business. Of course, the challenge is how you manage them. Most companies out there are still reliant on very manual methods. They're editing templates, they're instructing users to copy and paste disclaimers into place, or perhaps even worse, they're having to rely on someone in the IT team to patch things up when legal sends through the latest disclaimer or an update to it. It is ultimately time consuming for the people responsible. It's also incredibly error prone. And honestly, I think it's very obvious it's not particularly sustainable. For a long time, Exclaimer has helped organizations solve this challenge, making it possible for our customers to apply a disclaimer in a controlled and automated way. But very recently, we wondered, could we improve how disclaimers are managed? What if managing disclaimers was as easy and scalable as managing email signatures? That's what today is all about. We're going to be showing you our latest feature, a feature that puts IT squarely back into control, gives legal exactly what they need to reach 100% compliance, and eliminates all of the operational mess that surrounds this task. And at the same time, we're going to be having a frank conversation on what you should be considering as you create the email disclaimers for your organization. Now, I'll be clear, this isn't intended as legal advice. We're not here to tell you what to say, but we'll certainly be showing you how to say it consistently. And that's consistently everywhere. So let's turn to my two colleagues who are here with me to help tell this story of why disclaimers matter and, importantly, how we've improved our solution. Lawrence is a product manager who belongs to our core services team. He's helped shape this feature from the ground up. And I'm also joined by Alex, who's the information security manager at Exclaimer. He has deep experience in threat detection, risk, and compliance operations. So let's get started. Alex, I am going to come to you first with this question. Disclaimers. They've been around for ages, right? Everyone knows what an email disclaimer is, but yet people still seem to get them wrong. What's the real issue here, do you think?
James, so that's a great question. To start off, disclaimers have been around for several decades now, right? And they're still often treated like a checkbox most of the time. Sometimes they throw it at the bottom of an email and you simply forget. However, they actually serve several more important purposes. And when you break it down, each kind of ties back down to reducing the risk and reinforcing trust.
Okay, so let's walk through them one by one.
Yeah. So the first one would be limiting liability. Disclaimers help protect the organization by making it very clear that the content of the email isn't legally binding, isn't guaranteed to be accurate, isn't should and shouldn't be used to make critical decisions without further confirmation. That especially is very useful if something is very misinterpreted or it's
Mm.
afforded out of context. And then secondary to that is confidentiality and compliance. A well-placed disclaimer signals that sensitive information is being handled responsibly. It might instruct someone to delete the message if it wasn't meant for them, or remind recipients of that received the email, right, to not share certain contents of the email. That kind of language is particularly important if you're in a regulated space, which, we can talk more about that shortly.
Yeah, of course, of course. And obviously, there is as well, in addition, a sort of reputational angle here too, a sort of professionalism aspect to having a disclaimer in place.
Of course. So, a consistent professional disclaimer reinforces that your business takes communication very seriously, right? The
Mm.
imaging matters. It builds trust with clients, it builds trust with regulators, and it builds trust with partners. It simply just says, right, we know what we're doing, right? We're here to establish a foundational level of trust. It also helps in those worst case scenarios, such as, a phishing attack, right, or a misfired email, right? That a disclaimer, just it doesn't prevent the incident, right? But it helps show that you took reasonable steps to inform, original recipients and reducing the risk of it. And it goes such a long way in the damage control. Lastly is consistency. If every department or team is sending emails with different disclaimers or none at all, it can create confusion. Centralizing that ensures your message aligns, across the board. There's no off-brand language. There's no outdated legal text floating around. It's just one clear disclaimer displaying the information that you need to establish a trust. Now, depending on where you operate, and specifically also what industry you're in, there may be laws that require more information or strongly imply that you should include disclaimers.
Okay, so if you don't mind, let's unpack that a little bit. What kind of laws or regulations might we be talking about? What things should be at the top of people's minds?
Oh, James, you're up in a can of worms with that question. So we have, we can start off with the biggest one, right? The one that we're all very familiar with is HIPAA, right? HIPAA and secondary to that regarding banking is GLBA. They don't legally mandate a disclaimer word for word, but it's so common, right? It's so expected that organizations should do that as a way of just displaying good faith and protecting
Mhm.
sensitive information. And, from personal experience, right, we can all agree that even just adding disclaimer when you receive, your lab results or, from a doctor's follow-up, just goes such a long way with establishing that trust that you have with your personal doctor than one that you would
Entirely,
not
yeah.
with, right? So this properly worded disclaimer just helps demonstrate that. Same goes with what's called the FISMA, which is a Federal Information Security Management Act. And this applies to anyone handling federal information systems. That one, you actually do need to legally require that communications and disclaimers are properly marked. And if you're in California, we have the CCPA, the California Consumer Privacy Act. And it focuses heavily on personal data rights. And while it doesn't require a disclaimer, including one just helps so much in referencing the privacy practices, right? Linking the company policies to show the transparency and the intent. And especially in business to business environments where customer data is involved. Lastly, another example I can think about is Canada. They have one called the PIPEDA, PIPEDA, right? We can call that. And disclaimers help support the transparency and reinforce the commitment into protecting your own personal data. And again, even though it's not explicitly required, it just goes such a long way. And something along those lines with Canada is the Canada anti-spam legislation. And this is primarily focused on marketing communications, but the purpose of it is to maintain clear legal messaging, including disclaimers. And the purpose of it is to show, the best practices, right? And around the identity, the consents, and the sender credibility.
Right. I mean, those were some fantastic examples. Thank you, Alex. If I might trouble you, just for my European
Mhm.
friends who are in attendance, what kind of things should they be monitoring? Are you aware of any examples there?
Hmm. So. in the UK, we have the Companies Act, and the
Right.
Companies Act states that your registered company needs the company name, the number, and address in every business email. If you've missed that, then you could face a fine of, I believe £1,000 and give or take £100 every day until a fix is implemented. Now, within the EU itself, right, we have local laws, and then we have one on the Fed, just on the EU level, right? On the local laws, we have such case with Germany, France, and Netherlands, and those fall in the category of the EU company law directives. And of course, right, we have the big one, which is the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation. And, in the same bucket with HIPAA, right? While GDPR doesn't explicitly require disclaimers, again, it goes such a long way with supporting compliance work, right? Supporting the trust, supporting, data, what data rights you have, and, just et cetera. And an example of that is including, a line of confidentiality, linking the policies again, right? And just help reinforce the personal data that you have control over. Now, was I included the Americas, I've included Europe and just other parts of the world, right? I know Brazil has one called LGDP, which is very similar to GDPR. Singapore has PDPA. Australia has the Privacy Act, and very different laws, different naming conventions, but the principle is still very much the same, right? Which is emphasizing transparency and purpose when handling personal data. Now, again, right, we kind of see the theme that disclaimers are not legally required in most regions, but going back to that level of trust, right, using my doctor as the example, right, even though it's not required, I can just have, I'm very happy to say that I'm happy to working with my doctor, right? And finding solutions, right? And just going such a long way, making sure that doesn't get disclosed, improperly elsewhere.
Yeah, it's really interesting because again, you've pointed out something very obvious. In a lot of these examples, whilst it's not necessarily required, there's still an expectation. Even though the law doesn't say explicitly you must include a disclaimer, it does go a long way in establishing trust and protecting the
Mhm.
organization.
Yeah, yeah. And now regarding the law, the legal side of it, where it doesn't say you must, right? But it's expected. James, right now, if I were to come over for a dinner at yours, right? But you fed me this amazing meal, right? But I don't say thank you, right? Wouldn't you say your trust is a little bit, it's like it's an ouch moment, right? It's like, well, I made all this dinner for you, I made sure that everything is well, well said and done, right? But I didn't get this reciprocated like trust or like a thank you, right? And it goes the same way with disclaimers, right? And it's better be safe than sorry. It's best practice to say thank you after having a good meal, right? That you fed me. And in some sectors, right, it's very much non-negotiable, right? Like I should say thank you if it's your grandma feeding me this, right? So in many cases, right, disclaimers are treated as part of the broader compliance toolkit, alongside with encryption, antivirus, data loss prevention, and retention policies. They don't replace those things, but they show the intent. And when regulators audit your communications, they're not just checking that you secured your data. They're also looking at what you told people about it.
Yeah. Yeah, always say thank you to my grandma because otherwise I know what I'm going to get, right? No, I think that's very valid. I especially like that piece about the audit, right? Because you know that when those things happen, you want everything in your arsenal to be able to prove you took the necessary steps to prevent well any non-compliance whatsoever. Let's move on and let's talk a bit more about reputation and risk. Disclaimers have been around for some time. Why do you think that email disclaimers have kind of started to get this bad reputation or be seen as maybe not as important anymore?
Hmm. Mostly due to the fact that it's poorly executed. Most folks, believe that they carry no legal authority, but again, taking a step back, it does support a broader compliance posture. Now, again, it's not every disclaimer will hold up in court, right?
Mm,
They show the sender made an intent to define the terms, right, to protect the confidentiality and to communicate the legal objective. But however, the absence of a disclaimer can leave a company's doors open to variety number of disputes, fines, what ifs, he said, she said scenarios. And we've seen companies get caught up due to the fact that disclaimers were either inconsistent across departments. IT may say one thing, legal might say the other, finance might say another, right? And when you see that inconsistency, right, now your trust is scattered all over the place. And again, it just leaves two doors with disputes and fines. And we've seen companies get caught up, with the inconsistency of that. And at the end of the day, IT gets called in last minute to make sure to address these problems.
and I guess as well, it's true that this is a problem that only gets sort of worse and harder to combat the more the business scales, the more the organization scales, right?
Correct. And especially being in the IT department for several years now, it's not fun being called in something reactive when it can be done proactively, right?
Right.
And as a business is scaling, right, multiple time zone differences, multiple officers handle, right? Even just considering the fact, we have different holidays, different company yeah, just so many things that as the company grows on a global level, and with distributed teams, it's just virtually impossible to manage this manually, right? Through templates alone, right? And people send emails from phones, unmanaged devices, web clients that don't load signatures at all. And if your disclaimer isn't applied centrally, you just have no way of guaranteeing it's actually sent.
Right. Yeah, and obviously, post-pandemic world, people are sending emails from more and more devices. We have to contend with remote workers, but those challenges, they're not going to fly with the regulator. You're not going to be able to argue, oh, I didn't have access to that device, or well, it worked on that version of Outlook. Those excuses just aren't going to cut it, I suppose.
No, they're not. And it's as we're having more devices being able to send out emails like this, right? I think we can all agree on a professional level when we receive an email and at the bottom it says get Outlook on iOS, right? Or Android. It's just not that professional either, right? It's like a doctor sending you a message about something that's very serious and you get this, half effort of sent, from iPhone. It's like, oh, like I thought my health is taken very seriously, right? Why is it not serious all of a sudden? So that's why having the control of this is key. You need to be able to prove what was applied, where, and when. And this level of transparency not only helps with staying on top of updates, like when legal or compliance sends through, a change late notice on a Friday, right? But it also makes audits so much more smoother and, just a lot more easier to handle.
Of course, this is where central and automated control can have a massive impact.
Yeah, so that's why when you have the right setup, disclaimers are automatically applied regardless of how, where, when the email is sent, right? That's the control IT needs. We, again, going back to my point earlier, we like to be in a proactive, approach, not reactive. And having this in place, especially in regulated environments, just goes such a long way.
Thank you. And you have done your part in helping me segue into talking about our new feature. So thank you very much for that. Um, we're going to turn our attention to how our solution Exclaimer helps IT and compliance teams get to that level of control, get the control they need to protect their brand, maintain professionalism, bolster trust, and avoid ultimately the risks associated with not doing those things. Lawrence, if I can come to you, can you perhaps provide a little context on how disclaimers have been managed within Exclaimer up to now? What's it been like until very recently?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. So Up until now, disclaimers have been managed within signature templates. So customers can input their disclaimer as a static text field or do it via our branding feature. And they'd have to do that for every single signature template. And while that's quite easy for smaller companies with smaller setups, as soon as you kind of introduce more languages or departments or geographies, that gets more, that means there's more signatures to manage, more disclaimers to manage. And if there are updates from legal, as Alex has alluded to before, that means going through all of those different signature templates, making the changes in each individual one, and trying to make sure they're all accurate and up to date.
Yeah, and obviously in both of those examples, like setting up disclaimers for various different use cases, geography, territory, whatever, or even just making an urgent change to your single disclaimer, but doing that across multiple templates. Both of those things do involve an awful lot of IT resource, time spent cloning templates, going into templates and editing, tweaking them. So it was quite an inefficient drain on IT resources, one might argue, even as though it was a lot better than the alternatives of not using exclaimer. We still knew that we could improve things. So with the launch of disclaimer, what has changed, Lawrence? How can we now say we've made life even easier for IT professionals?
Cool. Well, do you want me to show you through it quickly?
Yeah, that would be absolutely amazing.
Let me bring up my screen. Let me know if you can see it.
Yep.
Cool. So here we are on the Exclaimer homepage. And as you'll notice in this left-hand sidebar over here, we've created its own individual workspace for disclaimers, similar to we have for signatures and campaigns. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. And as you can see, I'm on the disclaimers overview page. Here we've already set up our disclaimers based on different languages. And this might look familiar to you because this reflects what we have for signatures and campaigns as well. In the top left, we've got you can see the name, a preview, who this is, which senders this is going to apply to, how it's being configured, and which recipients are going to receive this disclaimer. So in terms of how simple it is to set up, I'll just run you through that now. So in the top right, we've got create. And then here, I'm going to, as an example, set up a Spanish language disclaimer. And then bear with me whilst I copy in my Spanish. So here we have a nice text input field, and underneath I can make small adjustments to the width, text alignment, and text direction. And what's really nice is down the bottom here, we've included a little preview panel. So you can see if I change the width of this, it updates in the preview section. So you can see how that will look in reality. And what I'm going to do now is just click up here to enable my disclaimer and save it. And as you can see, it's been added down here amongst the rest of them.
Amazing. So I guess this is perfect then for a multinational company. Say you've got users in 5 countries and you need to localize your disclaimers. You've got the capability of doing that here in the product.
Yeah, that's right. And that was a very kind of simple setup there. We've also included lots of different rules so you can manage how this disclaimer is applied. Again, very similar to campaigns and signatures, so the experience is consistent. And here I can change which senders this applies to, but in this instance, I'll keep it as everybody. You can add in exceptions. And in this case, because I've set up a Spanish language disclaimer, and I want that to apply to external customers that we might be speaking to, and I can be very granular in terms of the recipients that will receive this particular disclaimer. So I've connected my Salesforce and HubSpot lists. And so here I can target just our Spanish speaking contacts. And now if I save that, and then if I go back here, I can see on this page here how this disclaimer has been set up and be confident that our Spanish-speaking customers are going to receive a disclaimer that they can read and understand.
Excellent. What's amazing there is that we're kind of connecting up some of our Pro Plan functionality, CRM integration, to allow our customers to be really deliberate with, again, where they're applying their disclaimers, making sure that they've got the flexibility of adhering to the requirements wherever they're sending, which is great. What about previewing how the entire signature looks before going live, Laurent? How do our customers make sure that in situ the disclaimer is congruent with the remainder of the signature they're applying?
Of course, we're going to want to make sure that we can test this. So again, over in the left-hand side, we've got the signature tester. And then here, I can input a particular staff member, colleague, or email address from somebody internal, and just test if I'm sending to a particular customer. In this case, I've kept it as a UK customer, so I'm expecting to see the English language disclaimer, and I put in a disclaimer test as a subject line. So now on clicking test, I can see how, based on the rules I've configured for my signatures and campaigns and disclaimers, how this actual signature will appear based on those settings. So as you can see at the top here, I've got my signature body. Underneath is my campaign, and rightfully so, I've attached the English language disclaimer to the bottom of this email. So now I can be confident that in all of our dealings, kind of externally with customers, we are covered against all of those risks that you and Alex have been talking about.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Lawrence, for that demonstration. Before I let you off the hook for the time being, I would love to hear from you what you think the key benefits are for managing disclaimers in this new way.
Yeah, well, number one, you can guarantee compliance across all of the different disclaimers in different regions by being able to kind of target recipients more granularly in particular languages. Hopefully, it will reduce the number of manual errors. At the moment, in order to make changes to disclaimers, IT customers are having to go through individual signatures, update specific signature templates, and do that for multiple signatures at a time. So having this kind of dedicated workspace with a much simpler kind of UI, and it just kind of increases the amount of control that people have over the disclaimers. Also, in terms of those last-minute updates that legal might require, it's much easier now to just come to this dedicated workspace, make these small tweaks, and be confident that they've applied to the correct senders and recipients. As you can see before, it was very difficult to manage disclaimers for different geographies, departments, locales. And with this setup, it's very easy to do that and apply again to the correct senders and recipients. And then also an additional benefit of having disclaimers set up in this way is that these disclaimers are appended to the bottom of email signatures below the campaigns. So if you are running marketing campaigns, that will increase the visibility of those while still covering the business and reducing any kind of risks by having that disclaimer appended to the bottom.
Okay, so if you'll forgive me for summing that up, just to make sure I've understood more than anything, one central dashboard where all disclaimers are going to be centrally controlled moving forwards, much more flexible targeting into who is receiving each disclaimer that you need to apply. Full localization support. You can have your different disclaimers in your different languages very easily. Full visibility, so you can see all of the disclaimers that you're applying in one place. And most importantly of all, no manual updates that have to occur on every single email signature that you are applying. You're saving yourself a wealth of time just by managing that disclaimer component in one central place. Do you think that covers everything?
I've put my explanation to shame. And It would just mean that our IT customers are not going to feel alarmed when an update to a disclaimer is needed urgently or at all, and it's just going to give them the confidence that they need to cover the business, and so they can focus on other things they've got going on, their higher priority items, of which I'm sure they have. They've got lots of other more important work to do.
Yeah, indeed, indeed. What I love about this is that if you're a non-customer of Exclaimr, you're evaluating us for the very first time, you get to make use of this straight away to set up your disclaimers on day one and manage them in the most straightforward and efficient way possible. And if you're an existing customer already with us, like this is available, go and use it. You're going to need to move your disclaimers out of your existing signatures, but once you do, you're going to benefit in all of these amazing ways. So something to consider at least. All right. I think we have dwelled on our new feature long enough for today. Alex, I'd like to return to you to now start talking about what managing disclaimers actually might look like day to day. Perhaps provide for our audience some real world examples. So, how are teams using disclaimers functionality in practice?
Hmm. One of the most common use cases I've seen is, or we see on a day-to-day, is US healthcare organizations. So let's say that you're in IT of a part of a large health or hospital group. You've got your clinical staff, HR, finance, administration, but within the hospital group, it's particularly only clinical staff would need HIPAA disclaimers for external communications. Now, it sounds like with Exclaimr though, right? The IT can set up a rule that only emails can be sent or sent by the clinical department, including the disclaimer, and make sure that the internal emails stay clean and that there's no need to rely on staff to remember much, right? Since it's already automated, it's applied automatically. Another group I can think about is manufacturing. So one company might operate, across the US, UK, Germany, Netherlands, France, right? But just where different local laws would apply. And, to make sure that we satisfy each regional legal requirements, the legal and compliance team of said the manufacturing organization can create these tailored disclaimers in each of their local language, local regulations, etc. Now, it also sounds like with the Exclaimr product, right, that assigning the right disclaimer based on, where the center is located, right? Boston, Berlin, Burning Man, right? I mean, it's pretty seamless. And I've also seen this come up in professional services sectors, primarily consultancy, law firms, and accounting practices. Many of these different businesses, right, and different teams handle different types of sensitive client data. Uh, example being a law firm could use the Exclaimr product to assign disclaimers that clearly separate privileged advice from general correspondence or, just that intro call, right? And it gives the legal team, especially peace of mind of not need to worry about that one sentence, that one detail, right? Because in the legal route, you especially have to be wary of every single detail you put on a piece of paper, right? And also helps IT, avoid managing these endless custom templates on, from depending on who you're interacting with. Um, Another common pattern we see is organizations that have multiple brands or subsidiaries under one parent company. A holding group might want each sub-branch to have their own disclaimer, their own language, looks, links, maybe themes for holidays coming up, right? Or whatever internal activities there are happening. but still manage them centrally. So with the Exclaimer product, organizations can use these domain level rules and brand targeting to keep everything compliant, to keep everything on brand, to keep everything, simplified without overloading the workload of a, specific individual or group.
Okay, and so there's some fantastic examples, and I love how you brought it back to using Exclaimer to make that all simpler. If we can, could you answer this question? Like, those are some great examples of how companies are using disclaimers to kind of meet legal requirements. But do you think that there's examples you could share where you've seen out there in the wild people using disclaimers for things beyond that legal checkbox?
From a security standpoint, I would say just in the integrity side of it, right? Is James Wayne really James Wayne sending me this message? So we see tech companies using disclaimers to clarify that emails are not legally binding. We see other examples of adding short warnings, such as do not forward. This message may contain confidential content. Not because it's required, but again, going back to what we previously discussed, it was ha handling and reinforcing the data handling habit side of it, right? And trust, that's I should say thank you to your cooking at the end of the day, right? It was very
Yeah.
great, and it just goes such a long way. Um, and I've also seen organizations, add brand like touches to their disclaimers. When I look at phishing emails, right, on my day to day, a lot of the time they actually don't add disclaimers to these sorts of things, right? So it's super easy to identify, or it can be actually one of the first focal points you look at, right, is a disclaimer if it's worded properly. With ChatGPT, what I've seen sometimes is if every word is capitalized, right, which disclaimers wouldn't have that. Maybe the font's a little bit different, more so. So global businesses, rotate disclaimers on, for multiple languages to reflect the user's location, ensure the consistency with the company's tone, and ensure the consistency, especially on the branding perspective, right? And others use them as privacy policies, reinforcing acceptable use policies, and reinforcing just the day-to-day usage of how to send email, whether it be for internal or external purposes.
I hadn't really considered disclaimers in the context of tone of voice, but that's an interesting thing to consider as well. Like, does your disclaimer also just like share a little bit about how your company likes to communicate the sort of ideologies perhaps that you hold dear? Disclaimers have perhaps a bit of a role there as well. It's an interesting thought.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
It's certainly, by the sounds of things, a little bit of a lot of things, right? It's a little bit of compliance and making sure that you're doing things with the right intent. It's a little bit of governance, making sure that people are uh, responsibly handling data and thinking about their data handling habits in general. And then there's a little bit of like trust, reputation, brand integrity, professionalism, kind of wrapped up all together.
Yeah, it is a little bit of all in one, right? And it's not always about avoiding fines. And quite frankly, I think the fine part is such a secondary or tertiary reason to care about disclaimers, right? It's, like we discussed earlier, right? It's the branding, the governance, and the compliance. It's making sure how your emails reflect your business, right? Reflect who you represent. It's the consistency, just making sure things are clear, right? And within control. And right, your business reputation goes such a long way, and it's the biggest consideration when engaging a service within a company, right? For a company.
Yeah, and
Let's like I like to use my example earlier with a doctor, right? Or just recently, doing my own taxes, right? It's nice when you get your own taxes back and you get this whole sort of ordeal, right? I'm not a professional with numbers by any means, right? But I know that the reputation that the individual or business I've consulted with, right, is my biggest consideration. And the branding just goes such a long way with it. So I'm sorry to cut you off right there, but
No, no, no. I think that's and that in your example there is when there's already a sort of relationship between the sender and the recipient, right? You're already conscious that
correct.
your doctor should be professional, but that's the expectation then. It's even more important when you're sort of in that first touch, when there isn't an existing relationship between the sender and recipient. Seeing that email look professional, have the disclaimer in place, it goes a long way in that immediate moment of, oh, these people are new to me, but they look reputable, they look trustworthy. I think that's a
Correct.
very interesting thing to be mindful of when we think about disclaimers too. Um, Look, that was some excellent insight, Alex. Let's move on to talking some practical tips and best practice. Who, in your opinion, should actually own and manage email disclaimers within an organization?
Ownership. We love accountability and ownership. Great question. And honestly, this is the part where businesses start dividing up, going different routes with this. In my humble opinion, I believe legal should take the route with this. At least they should take the first round of it. They should be the one analyzing it, making sure that, from a branding perspective, from a legal perspective, its language is accurate and up to date. But they should not be working in isolation either. Again, this should be the first round, but not the last round or the immediate, like final say.
Yeah. And just to add on to that, from my perspective, I think it really works well as kind of a cross-functional effort. I think, legal is going to provide the content, compliance helps to map it to the relevant regulations. IT has got to own the deployment and the targeting logic, as discussed in the demo. And then if your customer facing comms or brand that might need to be included to make sure the tone and the formatting are on point.
Exactly. I mean, dreamwork makes the teamwork, right? Or teamwork makes the dream work. But that way, disclaimers are not only compliant, they're also appropriate for the audience, its own brands, it's consistently applied. And with the disclaimer product, I mean, it sounds like everyone can play their part, with it without stepping on each other's toes. Legal updates the message, IT publishes it, marketing handles on the presentation side of it, right? But you got full visibility across the board.
Yeah, I mean, great answers, and thank you, Lawrence, for chiming in there. I think that was actually very useful to kind of think about uh, how we can split up some of that responsibility between compliance and IT. Okay, let's move on. Let's both of you now think, what should teams, in your opinions, be doing when it comes to disclaimer content and management? Who wants to go first?
Less is more. Keep it short. Keep it simple. Keep it relevant. The goal isn't to bury, another person with, barriers of paragraphs, like Bible entries, right? It's just flagging the right message, right? And at the right moment and at the right time to the right recipient. Legal disclaimers, it's just get straight to the point. This email is confidential, not intended for the wrong participant, intended for only legal advice. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less.
Yeah, short and sweet, I think is a good approach. But what I would advise is to not copy and paste the same disclaimer for the whole company. Not everyone needs the same message. The finance team might need a different tone from the HR team or from your legal department. And the good thing is that Exclaim makes it really easy to set that up, and very easy to manage, and so it can be used very flexibly.
Yeah, and then to add on to that, Lawrence, it's a habit, make it a habit to review them. We've seen companies forget about a legal change, regional update, last minute law publication or publishing, right? And because of that, the disclaimer is now what's considered an old template, right? If your disclaimer references outdated laws or has the wrong company address, it just looks so sloppy, and it doesn't just raises red flags when it comes to audits. So it helps be intentional about the tone. A good example with that being a disclaimer sent by HR or customer support. You want to approach a little bit softly, right? Rather than someone on legal and finance. Um, we've also seen teams use this flexibility to reflect their brand while also meeting the legal criterias. And it's very, very useful to have that in customer facing roles.
Mm. No, I like the advice about short and sweet. Certainly, nobody wants to read War and Peace on their emails when they get to the very bottom of it. Probably, actually, the antithesis of what you want. You're probably working against yourself at that stage. So I think that's very sound advice. I want to just dwell on the reviews, the habitual reviews, and doing that as a repeatable process. Do you think that's critical? Do you think people should be thinking about when those take place?
Yeah, I mean, it most definitely is. And we live in a fast-paced environment, right? Things are subject to change at any moment. And, we on the divide and conquer, right, on which department takes what, that's something to add in as well, as a responsibility factor, right? I would suggest building this into your compliance calendar, right? Weekly, monthly, it's up to you to decide. But just like how you would review your policies every quarter or an annual basis, or when the regulatory change were to occur, you do the same thing with your disclaimers.
Yeah.
Mm.
And I'd say when you're creating your disclaimers as well, or coming around to reviewing them, I'd say don't underestimate the visual side of it. So I don't think they should break the layout of your email or look just like they've been bolted onto the bottom. So it might make your email signature look quite disjointed. And when they're styled properly, i.e. with like the same font, spacing, and alignment, they really reinforce the professionalism of your message. And if you're working in a multilingual or multinational context, think about character support and regional formatting, because we've seen cases where a disclaimer rendered perfectly in English. However, the French and German version might have broken accents or incorrect line spacing. And so the preview panel that I showed to you, making sure that you're reviewing that when creating and editing and updating your disclaimers, help you catch that before pushing it live.
Mm. Yeah. uh, Certainly want to make sure that these things look right before you just set and forget, right? And I suppose within that, as we think about how multi-language signatures appear, there's also the need to be very cautious when you're translating existing disclaimers into your various languages. You don't want to mess up intent by mistranslating or doing something sort of haphazardly. Okay, and what advice would you provide to anyone who's still on the call and is still using manual templates or perhaps asking users to copy and paste in their disclaimers?
From a cybersecurity point of view, I would say it's risk, right? You can't guarantee the wording's correct. You can't prove what was sent. And if someone removes the disclaimer by mistake or even on purpose, well, now you've kind of lost credibility, over the visibility and control aspect side of it.
Yeah, and that's why I think the centralized management, having that distinct workplace for disclaimers is key. So with that and our new feature, updates happen instantly across the organization. There's no waiting on rollout, chasing people. You've got an audit trail, clear visibility and consistency, and all of that without creating additional overhead for IT customers.
Excellent. Okay, cool. So I think we have arrived at somewhat of a checklist, if you will, for our audience to take away today. Number one, uh, include the right people when you are embarking upon the process of reviewing disclaimers, make sure you've got representation from people like legal, like compliance. You're going to want the IT team involved from a practical sense, and maybe even somebody from your comms team, maybe as well, to be present in that conversation. Be concise, no war and peace, don't write too much, get to the heart of the message quickly. Definitely think about how you're tailoring by different departments or different regions or different languages. Get into the habit of reviewing disclaimers regularly, a good cadence that allows you to make sure you're covering all your bases. Style them very clearly so that you adhere to your branding. And if you can, always centrally manage them so you get that guaranteed consistency across the board. Is that everything? Have I got it? Have I got it all there?
Yeah.
Do you think that's it?
I think that sounds, you know, you hit the nail on the spot right there. And you know, I guess you kind of add on, you know, not to a checklist, but just more of a general statement. It's disclaimers are not about covering every possible scenario. They're about putting a safety net in place, you know, to reflect how your organization communicates. When done well, it becomes a passive part of security. You know, it's proactively done. And I know it's a big enhancement to the compliance culture. And it reminds staff to think twice, and you know, signaling to outsiders that your organization takes data handling very seriously.
Awesome. That was great. I think that was very concise. I think we'll probably end our discussion there. Thank you for that practical advice. I think people should be able to walk away, we hope, with some things that they can think about when considering disclaimers, some clear priorities perhaps for what you can go and address tomorrow or even today. Why wait? Let's switch gears though. We've been able to accrue some questions that we hear all the time from IT teams. And I'd like to pose those to you both now. So these are things that people really want to know as they perhaps explore how this feature works in practice. So let's say, I think it's probably one for you, Lawrence. Let's say a user matches more than one disclaimer rule. How is Exclaimer going to decide which disclaimer gets applied?
Yeah, great question. So this tends to happen a lot in larger organizations. So what we've done is make rule priority totally customizable. So you can set the order yourself, top to bottom, and our system will apply the first match that it hits. You can also mark rules as exclusive, which means once a match is made, it won't keep checking others. It's designed to be predictable and flexible.
Cool. And I guess in larger organizations, you're not therefore just going to be managing one type of disclaimer. You've got sort of several stacked up in that example, right?
Right, just as you saw in our demo, had multiple disclaimers there. So you might have a legal disclaimer for outbound emails, a privacy statement for marketing, and something totally different for internal finance teams. Rule priority helps you stack these correctly, so one doesn't accidentally override the other.
Okay. So what then if we don't want disclaimers showing up on internal emails, or perhaps even in the reply of a thread? Is that something we can do?
Yep, so we've accounted for that. So you can configure rules to only apply to external emails or to only kick in on the first send, not on replies or forwards. You can also set rules to exclude certain domains. So if you want to keep internal comms clean, you absolutely can.
Excellent. That's a big one. We've definitely all seen email chains where, again, the disclaimer stack at the bottom is longer than the message that precedes it. So that's great to know.
Yeah, and I just want to add as well, there's not just about the clutter. So it can affect readability, especially if the same message is being passed between multiple departments. So keeping disclaimers scoped properly helps with focus and keeps internal conversations much clearer.
Yeah, true. Okay, I've got another question for you. What about Exclaimer's integrations? Does this work, for example, with our existing user directory? That's a great question.
Yeah, so we sync directly with Azure or Entra ID and Google Directory. So user data like department, job title, region, that all stays current. And if somebody changes teams or locations, the rules they match will update automatically. So no manual changes will be needed.
Okay, and I guess there, just to be very clear and deliberate, that sync is automatic.
Yeah. So it runs regularly in the background. So if someone moves from one department to another or gets promoted, Exclaimer automatically updates their rules match. So there's no need for somebody to manually reassign anything. It's all tied to your single source of truth.
Okay, last one. I'm sorry, I think these are all basically coming your way, Lawrence. Before you push a new disclaimer live, is there a way to test it? Is there a way to be confident that it's going to appear correctly, it's going to look right, and it's going to contain everything it needs to?
Yeah. So if you remember from the demo, there's that signature tester in the left-hand panel, which I encourage everyone to use just to make sure they've set it up correctly. And so in there, you can select a user and see exactly what their email will look like with the disclaimer applied. That'll be dependent on the email address of the sender and of the recipient. And it's also a great place for checking formatting, logic, or even catching small errors before you hit publish and roll out the disclaimer to multiple users.
But I mean, we saw in the demo, it's not just the disclaimer, right? You're actually seeing in that instance the complete package, if you will, the signature, the campaign, if you're adding one, and the disclaimer all together.
That's right. So just as you can target your disclaimers based on a number of attributes, you can do the same for signatures and campaigns. And so the signature tester shows the full output, signature, banners, disclaimers, formatting. So it's not just about testing the text, it's about seeing how it will look in the wild. And that's especially useful for catching weird formatting in translated content or making sure the layout plays nicely with your brand.
Excellent. Okay. I think we've covered some great questions there. That's a lot of useful detail. I think it shows how very flexible this feature is. And what's amazing, I think, from my perspective, it's something we've touched upon a number of times, but this is all without adding more admin for the IT person. Yeah, IT people are reaching this level of compliance in a really straightforward and efficient way, which I think is awesome. Okay, that does bring us to the end of today's session. So just like you said, Alex, got to thank your grandma. Unfortunately, in this instance, you are my grandmothers. So I am going to say thanks to both of you. And you are all grandmothers in our audience today. I hope you don't take offense to that, but I'm going to say thank you to you too. We've covered a lot from regional compliance requirements, disclaimer risks, and our new feature, and how that new feature provides more control, flexibility, and peace of mind. So whether you're managing one office or perhaps operating across, I don't know, 30 countries around the world, let's say you're a massive conglomerate, this is today all about giving you, the IT professional in your business, the tools to handle disclaimers without relying on templates, without relying on manual updates, and getting away from that guesswork. If you're using Exclaimer already and you're on our standard or our pro plan, this feature's there. You can go and make use of this today, and we encourage you to do so. You can go in, start building out those disclaimers, moving across to disclaimers if you've got those already in place. And we're here to help you on that journey if you need it. If you're not yet on a supported plan, or perhaps you're not even a Exclaimer customer yet, and you want a guided demo, we would be delighted to provide that. You can click the link in our chat to book a one-on-one session, and we can, of course, show you how this works in the context of your setup. We're going to be sending a follow-up email with a recording of this session, just in case you want to revisit any parts of our discussion. And we're going to be sharing some links to some helpful documents if you really do want to dig into the particulars of legal requirements within your teams. Hopefully that will be something you will all find valuable. If you did find today's session helpful, let us know. We love feedback. We like hearing whether the content we deliver is having the impact we want. And we always want to hear what topics you'd like us to cover next. So thank you so much for spending time with us. We look forward to seeing you next time. But from me, it is goodbye.